Hello and welcome to the program. The Ukrainian parliament approved a bill cancelling immunity from prosecution for MPs. 373 deputies voted in favor in the 450-seat parliament. The law will come into force on January 1st, 2020. This has been hailed as a historic moment for the Ukrainian parliament and a big anti-corruption victory. Passing the immunity measure was one of the key pre-election promises made by Volodymyr Zelensky. Joining us in the studio to discuss the latest political decisions of the new government is Oleksiy Haran. He's the research director at the Democratic Initiatives Foundation and professor of political science at the Kyiv-Mohyla Academy. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you for the invitation.
So it's obviously an important step, but will it usher in a new era of accountability for Ukrainian politicians, do you think?
Well, I think this is a step forward, but we need to analyze this step in the context. So actually it will depend on other steps which the parliament and government and president are going to have. And the problem, well, this is a problem, and at the same time this is advantage that actually we have now one-party rule. So basically one party can do whatever they want. Okay, they can pass laws, they appointed the government, they can dismiss prime ministers. So everything is in their hands, and basically in the hands of President Zelensky. So formally, cabinet of ministers is not subordinated to president, but de facto it is subordinated. And the question also, if we have this fight against corruption, will it be politically selective? Will it be politically motivated in some cases or not? Because, for example, what we had under Yanukovych, under the slogans of fighting the financial crimes, they imprisoned former Prime Minister Tymoshenko, definitely this was politically motivated. So the question how they are going to continue. And there are some concerns from not only from opposition, but basically from experts also regarding the procedure. An interesting point, however, is that the law they adopted was put forward by President Poroshenko.
Okay,
this is very important and very interesting.
Just before we get into that, and I'm very sure Mr. Poroshenko did a great job when he was in power. But before we get into that, Ukraine's ambassador to Austria, Alexander Sherbay, he tweeted, "For the first time in Ukraine's history, in Ukraine's modern history, MPs aren't above the law."
Well, this is true, but with all the, well, basically I said about that, okay, but also the immunity is lifted from judges. So there was a judicial reform which was conducted by under previous president, and now it's a step actually to make the impeachment procedure to be realistic. That's what President Zelensky also promised. So in this case, nobody would be above the law.
Right. So, but some specialists, skeptics, have warned that the total removal of immunity, just as you mentioned, shouldn't really be in place, and instead there should be sort of restrictions in place instead of a total abolition, because it could potentially guarantee that MPs wouldn't have that sort of independence, and maybe even potentially security forces, the security service could influence their decisions. So how realistic is that scenario in Ukraine where MPs could be pressured and wouldn't be independent?
Well, formally in the constitution there is still an article which mentions that MPs shouldn't be prosecuted under any political reasons. So basically they shouldn't be persecuted because of their political activity and statements they are making in the parliament. Okay, what would be the reality? I hope everything would be fine, but there are concerns, because we had experience with under Yanukovych, as I have mentioned, and this context these changes should be viewed in the broader context. And what we see right now, actually, as I have said, President is concentrating all all power in his hands, and he basically would like to increase the power of president. If we analyze the other constitutional changes he has submitted to the parliament, so we see the trend. He's going to increase his authority, which in my mind actually would be a step back. Because what we have now, the role of president is limited, and this is one of the main achievements of the revolution of dignity.
I think that's a very valid point, but let's talk about some of the, their first week in parliament, their first kind of working week. So far, we've seen his sort of crusade for anti-corruption, his anti-corruption, so-called anti-corruption crusade. He's passed a number of legislative laws, and we've seen...
I'm sorry, I don't see many anti-corruption laws.
Well, from what I understand, they kind of divide into giving more power to anti-corruption bodies.
Not really, actually, not really.
You don't agree with that?
No. He's going to introduce changes in the constitution, quite a lot of them, and basically, you are right, this is crusade. This is crusade because everything was adopted like within one day. Okay, and there are concerns about that, because there are concerns about procedure and there are concerns about substance, which President Zelensky would going to introduce in the constitution, and many things are simply populist. For example, a reduction of the members of the parliament to 300 from 450, and it's not clear. Okay, this is fine, this could be done. What is the reason for that? There was no real explanation. For example, he is going to fix the proportional electoral system in the constitution. So party slates in the constitution. Okay, this is fine, but why shouldn't we add to that open party slates? This is really important, and there was no real discussion, and there were no clear signs. So basically what the president is doing right now, he is, first of all, he's exploiting his own popularity to push forward these changes, which in its turn should increase the popularity of his party, because all these promises, they looks very nice to the
those were
common
his
people.
election campaign promises. He promised that during his election campaigns. Those were his core promises.
For example, he didn't promise that he will appoint the heads of the anti-corruption bodies. He didn't promise that this would increase his power. Okay, for example, he promised open party slates. Yes, that's true. Do you see the word open? Open in the suggestions? No.
Well, I see so far I see the removal of immunity for MPs, although an interesting point was made by Taras Shevchenko, the director of the Center for Democracy and Rule of Law. He said that although the measure was passed, lawmakers won't actually lose their immunity, since the immunity is guaranteed in other legislation, and that legislation remains unchanged. And it's also featured in Ukraine's criminal procedure code, which remains unchanged. So he says more active measures should be taken in order to guarantee that immunity and accountability is actually followed through on. Do you think that's a fair point?
Well, actually, again, from what I hear from experts in this field, there are concerns, which I have already mentioned here, okay, that it may be used in order for pressure, actually, on MPs. So basically, you are right. There are some provisions which are removed from Constitution, but which are still in the laws. But at the same time, maybe it's time also to listen to experts in this field in order to make this change really balanced. So everybody is in favor now of lifting immunity from MPs. Everybody, and the opposition also voted for that. And as I have mentioned, this was actually the law, draft law was submitted by President Poroshenko. But the question is, to what extent, because this is not the removal of, to what extent the rights of MPs would be also defended from potential political persecution.
Well, that'll be interesting to see. Thank you so much for joining us today. That was Oleksiy Haran, Research Director at the Democratic Initiatives Foundation, Professor of Political Science at Kyiv-Mohyla Academy. You're watching UATV.